interrupt this program to bring you a special bulletin.
All right. Hello, everyone. So used to saying YouTube, but we're not on YouTube right now. We are on Patreon, live on Patreon. Hopefully everyone's having a good Friday afternoon. I had this one scheduled for the other day, didn't have time for it. Something we don't do on this channel very often. I think I've maybe done one other React video, and I know React videos, they're all the rage. It's what all the cool kids do. I was never in the cool kid group. I was never picked first on the basketball team, never picked second on the basketball team. So I do React videos once every 2 years. It's whatever. So today we are going to be reacting to a video which I haven't actually seen all of this video yet. I started seeing clips of it making the rounds on X about a month ago at this point, I guess. I'm a little late to the game here. I think you're supposed to like react to videos within like 2 seconds of seeing it and within a split second of forming an opinion on it. I like to listen to a thing, ruminate on it for a little while. I don't know, 24 hours even. And then kind of give my opinion on it. Sometimes you can give an opinion off the cuff. I kind of have some opinions on what I think is maybe going on here, but I'm not quite for sure. I haven't seen this full clip. So we're going to listen to it. I am going to interject and interrupt as things are being said that I maybe find interesting or pertinent. Having not listened to it, it could be a 30-minute snooze fest. I don't know. I've heard maybe 3 or 4 clips from it at most, maybe even only like 2 clips from it. But the 2 that I heard were interesting. And I thought, well, that was probably, something that's worth discussing going on here. What it was, for those of you that are not familiar, you see, the Orthodox have the benefit of kind of existing under the radar of things. And there's pros and cons to that. There's pros and cons to general exposure, and then there's pros and cons to sort of an anonymity that some groups are afforded. But that sort of anonymity that the Orthodox are afforded allows them to, and at times, ignore some of the problems that exist in their own communion. That the Catholics, the lights are on in the closets for the Catholics, right? Any skeletons that may exist in there, any femur bones that are in this closet of this Catholic Church are going to have a light on them, and they're going to be scrutinized, and they're going to be, analyzed. Whereas pretty much 90%, even the people that are in the know are kind of not in the know about some of the inner conflicts within the Orthodox Church. One of them that's been brewing for some time now is how the Orthodox Church is going to be responding to this recent rise in orthobroism, this kind of I don't want to, I want to listen to this clip, so I don't want to ramble on too much here, but there's a general feeling that this movement is part of an already existing, I don't want to say faction, but contingent of sort of right-leaning youth, white youth of America, who are sort of looking for an outlet, looking for an escape route off the road of the highway of modern American liberalism in theology, and all these other things. So the Orthodox Church, not really having the kind of guardrails of entrance into their communion that maybe some of the more strict groups out there maybe observe, have seen an influx that I think they're going to struggle to absorb a little bit. Now, I know with the Ortho Bros, there's an attempt to kind of manifest a certain reality that doesn't quite line up with, they're trying to manifest a reality that doesn't actually exist in reality. You see this all the time in your interactions with the Ortho Bros online. They will come at you as bombastic, cocksure, as you could imagine, you know, a person could possibly be, without really any sense of irony or self-awareness that would necessitate the sort of place, the vantage point of which they're standing from, to be like finger wagging at Protestants or to be finger wagging at Catholics, without really acknowledging what's going on in your own communion, because I think in many cases they're not aware of it. They've been sold the sort of manifestation of orthodoxy, which they hope, if they keep tweeting it enough, will sort of present itself into reality. But recently, I think they got a cold dose of reality of what the Orthodox Church is like, especially here in the West, in the United States of America. And Jay Dyer, make of him what you will. I don't have any particular, I have some opinions on Jay Dyer, but I don't have any like strong opinions on him. I know he seems to elicit sort of strong reactions from people. I don't have a particularly strong reaction. I kind of have to meet a person to get a, I could judge, I could listen to somebody online for 9-10 hours at a time and still not have a good sense of who they truly are. But let me meet them in person within like 5-10 minutes, at least within the first meeting. If it's a significant meeting, I'll have a pretty good judge of whether or not there's somebody that I would consider trustworthy. So I'm not going to come at Jay from that angle. It's nothing personal here, but I am super interested in kind of what's happening with the influence that he's having, the influence that he's had on young men, and how the Orthodox Church may respond to that. So without further ado, we're going to play. I'm going to listen. You guys are going to listen. I'm not going to speed it up. I can't do the like 2 times speed. I hear people do that all the time, and it drives me crazy. I can't take anybody serious. I don't care. You could be the most serious. You could be talking about the most serious topic in the world, but if you sound like Groucho Marx on helium, I'm not going to be able to take you seriously. So we're going to listen in real time. I'm sorry. I'm not hip again. I can't do the 2 times listening speed. I have to listen to a person in real time, kind of absorb what they're saying, and also just take their cadence seriously. If they sound like Mickey Mouse after he's taken a hit of nitrous, I can't do it. I can't do it. So, you know, I know everybody's so busy these days. They don't have time. They have to listen to things at 2 times the speed because they have somewhere they have to be. I've got the afternoon. I've got a little bit of time here. I think we could probably get through some of this. Maybe even get through most of it, depending on how boring it is or is not. So let's see here. Add to stage.
You want to know what they tried to say about me when I first came in? Damick tried to say that I was a right-wing neo-in and that I should immediately be excommunicated.
Okay, so this is from a clip. This is from, it looked like Jay Dyer's in my waiting room down on the way StreamYard sets this up, which is a very strange thing. But anyways, this is a clip. This is not from Jay's channel directly. It's from a channel that clips Jay and makes money off of him, I think. But anyways, this is from the show that he did following this presentation from an Orthodox priest, I believe, which we're going to listen to here. So let's just listen.
Which was total lies. Patriarch Constantinople, Ukrainian schism, ecumenism, and Freemasonry almost 8 years ago. So these two podcasts that I did back then raised a lot of eyebrows, I suppose. And so immediately the people in those spheres, Antiochian and OCA, again, very limited certain spheres, decided that I was bad news. Now, I didn't even know any of these people. Had no idea who any of these people. I'd heard of people like Father Andrew Stephen Damick. I'd heard of people like Father Thomas Soroka, these people. But I'd never said anything bad about them, never attacked them or anything like that. And they began to post things publicly on their profiles, on their Facebook, that this rising trend of young men into Orthodoxy. Now, remember, this is like 2017. Okay, this is early on, 2018. It's becoming a problem. And somebody reached out to me that Ancient Faith Radio was pushing a lot of really weird heterodox stuff. The first thing I noticed was that Father Stephen Freeman wrote many articles saying that the Old Testament.
All right, I got to pause right there. Ancient Faith Radio, for those of you who don't know, they were kind of the like Catholic answers of the Orthodox Church about a decade ago, I want to say. I don't follow this stuff anymore. I don't really have a lot of interest to follow it anymore. But you wanted to, you were displaying an interest in Eastern Orthodoxy. Where do you turn to? Ancient Faith Radio. They had a lot of articles. They had a lot of podcasts, different people, different priests and theologians speaking. And they were representative of a pretty large body of Orthodox here, in so much as the Orthodox are a body in the United States. Ancient Faith certainly does represent a normie Orthodoxy that would maybe not respond so well to somebody like the Orthobros. So anyways, let's keep listening.
Testament was full of errors. It was all historically inaccurate, and that it just doesn't line up with the New Testament God, the God of love. Now, that's all Marcionism, clearly. And I started to realize, well, this sounds like somebody who's a liberal Anglican priest. This doesn't sound like anything I see in the Church Fathers. So I made a video responding to the specific theology.
I don't know if Jay is dog whistling there, but the fact that he said it sounds like a liberal Anglican. Well, folks, if you guys aren't familiar with Eastern Orthodox and the Eastern Orthodox history of the last 50 years plus, there was in the 60s, 70s, into the 80s, an influx of none other than liberal Anglicans, largely into Eastern Orthodoxy. Some of the prominent figures among this would be, of course, Timothy Ware, later Metropolitan Kallistos Ware, Father Andrew Toth, or Loth, I think his name is. David Bentley Hart was from among this group. A lot of different liberal theologian Anglicans. The way that the Orthobros have sort of entered into Eastern Orthodoxy within the last 5-6 years sort of mirrors the way that these liberal Anglicans entered Orthodoxy 40-50 years ago.
Logical points, nothing personal, nothing inordinate. And this enraged a bunch of people at Ancient Faith Radio. Let me show you this.
So much so, in fact, going back to that point, so much so, in fact, that many of us who have been following the Orthodox for a while, we looked into the Orthodox Church at one time. And sure, you could, much like the Catholic situation, you can read something on paper, but then when you go out and experience it in the real world, you find a much different thing maybe than what you've been reading on paper. Now, the Orthobros are at that we're reading it on paper, cocksure kind of phase of their conversion. They maybe have not even been into the Orthodox churches so much. And who knows, maybe they will have an overall influence on the Orthodox Church. It's hard to say. Time may tell. But those of us that have been following this for a while, most of what you encountered in Eastern Orthodoxy favored more. Now, I know somebody like David Bentley Hart has gone a little bit off the rails in the last decade or so, but 5 years ago, a decade ago, he was writing what was considered pretty mainstream Orthodox material. Certainly Metropolitan Ware was. And that's kind of the orthodoxy that many of us were introduced to and many of us knew until the Ortho Bros came along, chest thumping, saying that actually orthodoxy is. Let me just start again.
Who was a very helpful, lovely, godly man.
Is that Jay Dyer?
Was very helpful through this process. And he knew Father Stephen Freeman.
A lot different.
So I think things ended up not being as bad as they could have been thanks to Dean Arnold. So shout out to Dean.
Hopefully the audio is fine here. I don't have anybody to tell me.
But it was
if the
obvious
audio is good or not
to me at this point. And again, right after this, here's something crazy that happened. There was a big bunch of brouhaha because Ancient Faith Radio was promoting and offering a conference where a woman was invited to speak who promotes Skittles to kids through her kids' books and through other kids' books openly. I called attention to this.
The Skittles.
And
dog
who
whistling
do you think
again.
Was the bad guy for calling attention to this? Enter Father Stephen Damick to once again step in and talk about how bad I was, even though Ancient Faith Radio was openly promoting and inviting to conferences women who push Skittles to kids, but I'm the bad person because I called it out. So I started realizing
I feel like this might have been one of the clips that I heard. No, wait, it wouldn't, because there was a priest he was listening to. But there's a point he's making here. And look, Jay's right in the sense that the Orthodox, and I would lump in here the Protestants, and I would lump in here the Catholics, we all face the onslaught of the Skittles movement, as he calls it. The alphabet mafia. None of us are immune from that. The thing is, the Ortho Bros will come in and they're going to want to say, well, we in Orthodoxy either A, are protected from it. We have the proper guardrails to excise that, to filter that out of our the body, or B, it just doesn't exist in the body at all. Like you see a lot of, I'm not accusing Jay of this, but you will see a lot of the less informed Orthodox online chest thumping, pointing out the what they would say is rampant homosexuality in the ranks of the priesthood of the Catholic Church, or just in the ranks of a liberal spirit of invitation into the Catholic Church, assuming that such a thing doesn't exist in their own church. These particular people. I'm thinking of one I just saw the other day where he was ranting on about the Skittles movement in the Catholic Church, apparently unaware that it too is very prominent in sectors of the Orthodox body, especially in the West and in the United States.
Things off. And this is all documented in the video responding to Damick from 7 or 8 years ago. Next, there was an event where on Facebook, this is back when people were still doing stuff on Facebook, there was a discussion about women teaching in the church. Now, keep in mind, feminism is going to be a big role in this too. Feminism is a key point. I commented on a random person's profile that Paul teaches that women should not teach in the church in any kind of official clerical capacity. This angered Father Andrew Stephen Damick again, who went after me and wrote another entire public post all about me. This time he went to some satire videos and decided that I was an insane person because he didn't realize that I had satire videos. So he thought the stuff that was satire was real. Long story short, on Twitter, he called everybody who was
Jay's
an
pretty
Ortho
funny
bro
guy.
insult.
I'll hand it to him there.
This was a huge, this blew up. And this blew up in his face, and he ended up having to publicly apologize for calling everyone Ortho bros. Now, Father Stephen Damick never apologize to me about anything ever, at all. It just ignore him. I will publicly apologize for calling everyone in Jay's audience a bunch of incels. So another mediating priest said, let's just part ways and forget it. So that's what we did. Now, since then, of course, Damick has not ceased to not call me out. He doesn't do it as much as he used to, but it's still the same old story. And it's not just that sector. Ancient Faith also continued to promote and push a bunch of people who were bad news. And then eventually they started pushing out people who didn't go along with or talked about the Ukraine schism. So it became more and more political at the same time as they were pushing women and selling women's books that believed in women priests. Ancient Faith, Angela Dole Carson, a big Obama supporter, and they were pushing women who were Coptics, who wrote Coptic blogs and did a Coptic podcast on Ancient Faith Radio, who were pro TRA&Z. So this.
Okay, so I don't really know enough about Ancient Faith Radio to have an opinion on them. I've always thought of them kind of like as the equivalent of like the normie Catholic Answers, though Catholic Answers, even though they are pop level apologetics, I don't think they're ever openly promoting a progressive liberal agenda, whereas it sounds like Jay is accusing Ancient Faith of such. Now, I do know that there was some pretty troublesome comments from people like Callisto Swear, who in some respects as a theologian, I respect. But he was part, and he was not alone in this. He was part of a contingent of Orthodox thinkers who were toying with the idea of a female clergy, who were toying with the idea of a female deaconate, who were toying with the idea of the acceptance of gay marriage. And, you know, the Orthodox Church had their sort of lax view on contraceptives. They've had their lax view on divorce for some time. But be that as it may, these more recent progressive agenda things, which I would argue are in some respects more controversial and more pressing, are definitely not new and not unique to the Catholic Church or liberal Protestantism. They've long been in the Eastern Orthodox communion.
Got worse and worse and worse. But who was the bad guy? Me, of course. I'm the bad person throughout all of this for even talking about this stuff.
See, and the sad thing is, in many respects, the Ortho Bros, the Orthodox among the Orthodox, should be allies with many of us Catholics. They should be allies with many of the socially, I hate the word conservative, but socially or lowercase Orthodox Protestants. And we could get a lot further. We could get a lot more done if these people were not so just, I mean, I think at this point, I don't really know. Whenever Jay happens to pop up on my feed on YouTube, it's almost always some debate like call in Catholics and I will debunk you, or something about Catholics, or he's got the people in his proximity, close sphere, are debating Catholics or arguing with Catholics. And it's like, I do think there's a time and a place, but when you face an existential threat, which clearly he is facing, his church is facing, at times you have to have sort of my approach to these things are, I tend to take a realpolitik view towards issues and how we should handle them and how we should combat them and how we should prioritize them. And as far as I see it, the major threat as it exists right now is, in the West anyways, is one, the sort of post-World War consensus, as everybody's sort of acknowledging it to be right now, and all of the manifestations of that in terms of its progressive policies its liberal policies, even its so-called conservative policies with the form of free markets and things like that. Like, we should all be pretty much, as Christians, and a lot of Christians, a lot of them on the online community, I think, are starting to close ranks. While in many sense, I see Jay and the Ortho Bros, they're like a chink in the armor, right? They're a weakness to the body in terms of this Christianity, qua Christianity, and all of the sort of social evils that we face that threaten to undermine us. And I know he's got his excuses for why he takes that approach, but I do think that, in my own personal opinion, Jay should be leading the four of the Ortho Bros. Even if it's not like, hey, I'm going to hold hands with Catholics and we're going to be like buddies with Catholics, just sort of quietly tabling some of the issues that we have with each other for a moment and focusing on the same issues. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have any access to talk to him. I think Andrew Wilson has recently taken this approach. And I want to say he maybe even took a lesson, as many of us have. These guys are much more high profile than I am, but I say many of us loosely. A lot of men that I've spoken to in my real life, and I've heard a lot of conservative voices in media say that when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, it was really sort of an eye opener for them of sort of the hour is late kind of situation that we all face. And when I hear, like people like Jay Dyer, who's constantly harping on Catholics, as and I know he, like I said, I know why he thinks we're the problem, because he thinks that there's an international element to Catholicism that lacks in Orthodoxy. But even acknowledging that, there's still a huge, even if I don't necessarily acknowledge it as legitimate, but even if I were to grant it to them, there's still a huge, the majority, I think, of Catholics are still very socially orthodox, lowercase o, in their stances towards marriage and children and all of the things which plague our society right now. So that's really the number one. That's really like the number one issue that I have with the Ortho Bros, is not so much that they have a problem with Catholicism or that they want to debate us. It's just that they seem to prioritize that. Again, I've heard people like Andrew Wilson seem to sort of shifted gears a little bit. I've seen him even acknowledging some of the positions that we hold in common with one another. I know Jay is friendly with Tim Gordon, so, and I mean, I've got my issues with the traditionalists. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's things on this channel that I like consistently critique the traditionalists about. At the same time, I keep my critiques in check. I don't criticize them as harsh or as often as I would otherwise, because I don't consider traditionalists the enemy. I consider them, for the most part, brothers in arms who I would fight for to the death, both in the figurative and literal sense of that.
Cases, what we said was factual, correct, spot on, and orthodox. So the next thing that happened was Damick put out an article about internet orthodoxy. Internet orthodoxy is bad because the Ortho Bros don't go to church. They don't have spiritual fathers. No one is really guiding these men. They're just random dudes on the internet. But in reality, I'll tell you why. What was really going on. If we look at Google, particularly back when a lot of this was kicking off.
Sorry, I'm just getting a little bored. I find Jay tedious sometimes. I can't listen to an 8-hour podcast. Sorry.
Over the last several years, you'll notice that interest in what we talk about massively blew up beyond ancient faith radio. If you come back here to 2011, 2012, right? Nobody was interested in what we talk about. And then lo and behold, the more Ancient Faith Radio doubled down in 2018, coming after your boy. The more they talked about how bad I was, it flipped. There's the metrics for you for the last 10 years. In my opinion, that's why they were really mad. It had to do with their market share, their metrics, this and that. It's not about, that's what it's about.
That could be true. The bottom line is very strong motivator.
Now that's web search over 10 years. And notice how it flips. And that's YouTube over 10 years. Absolutely dead compared to what we do. So after this, things shifted away from ancient faith type stuff to then it became an issue of people within the OCA. One Father David Galloway did a private lecture to a bunch of OCA clergy, priests and bishops. I don't know who all was there. And I was sent images of the slides. And he did a talk where me and Father Hears were dragging people off of the ladder of St. John into hell, which is, by the way, very inappropriate, defacing the icon, putting me and Father Hears dragging people on an icon down to hell. But that wasn't for public consumption. And it turned out that that priest was charging people on his Patreon to do prayers. It also turns out that that priest had severe mental problems and other things going on. Here's the letter. The letter given to catechumens says, be sure and watch Ancient Faith and whatever these other ones are. I don't know what that is. Search scriptures. On YouTube, you can watch Father Josiah Trenna, which is odd because I think he's a little more trad than these people would like. Pajot.
All right, so that's
what roots of.
That's kind of, I hadn't caught that before, but that's kind of the gist of all of this. You have in Orthodoxy a spectrum. Let's just limit it to the United States. For the last 60 years, really you could argue for the last 100 years since the rise of the modern ecumenical movement in Eastern Orthodoxy, which is really a continuation of the old ecumenical movement in Eastern Orthodoxy, which had been largely suppressed because of the Ottomans. The trend for all of that was communication with the Catholic Church, open dialogue, open synodality, and all of these things. And, you know, all the major bodies of the Orthodox Church were on board of that. I have, for those of you that are watching this right now on Patreon, you should have already have watched our videos, the Eras of the Orthodox series on the 6th video is called Orthodoxy as Reactionism, or Against the Latins, Orthodoxy as Reactionism. And in that video, we go into depth about the ecumenical movement in Orthodoxy. And so that's sort of one end of the spectrum. Now, as you move, let's dare I say, let's put that spectrum on the left of the spectrum. And what is the left of the spectrum? What are they interested in besides ecumenical dialogues? Well, let's see. They're interested in reinterpretation of scripture. They're interested in reinterpretation of patristics, church history. You know, things like universalism are being thrown about quite liberally in these circles. They're interested in social issues around, you know, immigration and the Skittles community and women in the priesthood and all of these types of things. Now, they haven't had a Vatican II, but I'm getting ahead of myself there. But that's sort of the left of Eastern Orthodoxy. Then you get to this sort of center, maybe even like, it's hard to like center something like Orthodoxy or even something like Catholicism, because the center for Orthodoxy and the center for Catholicism are, in my sense, kind of like the truisms of the two. To take them as they truly are in a descriptive sense, the center for Eastern Orthodoxy would include, I think Jay's right there, men like Father Josiah Trenum, who is not on the side, I think, of some of these more left-leaning Orthodox, especially on social issues and these types of things. On ecumenism, I think he's generally, as far as I know, Father Trenum, I've seen him lead Eastern Catholics in prayer. I think he's generally on the side of the bilateral dialogues that are taking place. How far he actually wants to see the sort of commitments that the Holy Fathers make when they meet together in discussion between Catholics and Orthodox, I'm not for sure about Father, but I would say generally he would probably be correct to describe him as more of a centrist. And then you get more, Jay even said the word traditionalists, the right of the spectrum of Eastern Orthodoxy, which would include people like those that are in the ROCOR, the Russian church outside, the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, or those that are in the Orthobros sphere, who tend to be in communion with the body of Eastern Orthodox, though they're in this trajectory to wanting to be out of communion with that far left of the ecumenical spectrum. And then you have the extreme version of that, which would be like those that are out of communion with the worldwide body of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which would include the true Orthodox Church, the old calendarists, groups like this. And gosh, folks, does that mirror anything? Does that sound familiar to anything you've ever heard before? An ecumenical movement from about 100 to 60 years ago that was involved in sort of trying to reform certain aspects of the church to be more inclusive, to be more international, to be more et cetera, versus a centrist coalition forming, dare I say, a communio forming around thinkers like Ratzinger, and then a more sort of traditionalists with groups like FSSP and some of these other groups that are still in communion with the body of the worldwide church, though they fit onto that sort of further outskirts of the spectrum. And then you have those that are just out of communion with the body because of they don't want to be in communion with those that are on the ecumenical left of the Catholic Church. All of this stuff, it mirrors almost perfectly the problem in the Catholic Church. But come on in, boys. The water of Eastern Orthodoxy is warm, they tell you. And yet this is exactly what you're going to be up against. What Jay Dyer is publicly having to admit here, that the church that he tells you is based, bro, is going to do to you once you try to interfere with their project of forwardness and progressivism.
Orthodoxy. Wait a minute. Roots of Orthodoxy isn't Orthodox. So notice once again the absurdity of these people who, in an irrational way, hate what we do, hate me for absolutely little to no reason. And when you ask these people why, most of the time they don't even know. They've never watched what we talk about, what we do. They'll just say, debating's bad. He's a right-wing nut. Do you want to know what they tried to say about me when I first came in? Damick tried to say that I was a right-wing neo-in and that I should immediately be excommunicated, which was total lies.
The right-wing neo-in?
Right-wing alt-R person I debated, including JF, including Richard Spencer, But it was convenient because if he could cast a narrative that I was a neo-in, he could get me canceled and excommunicated right away.
Yeah.
So you understand, these people are devious. These people are insidious. They're not friendly people. They have a nice face. Meanwhile, they're over here doing stuff you wouldn't believe. And they act just like the libs who cancel people in all these same ways. What's the best thing that they could come up with? He's mean. What does that mean? He debates. Debate bro. He's a debate bro.
If I
Dean Arnold. So
oh
shout out
gosh,
to
should
Dean.
I go all the way back? Let me go for it.
Social organ. Well, to make a hit piece on me.
If I understood him right, he was saying that he debated NJF, Nicholas J. Fuentes. I assume that's what he means by that. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of the problem that I have is like the Ortho Bros seeking to debate people that they should otherwise probably be aligning themselves with strategically, because I'm sorry, the Catholics are much more poised in this country. The Catholics who align themselves with issues socially that are prescient, that are existential to the existence of Christianity in this country, are much more poised to be in a position to go after these sort of forces, these common forces that we are all trying to combat. And we would be wise to combat them as a sort of united front, right? Because the shooter, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but I do believe that the shooter that shot Charlie Kirk was a left-wing radical nut, an assassin, and he didn't bother to look first at whether Charlie Kirk was an Orthodox or a Catholic or a Protestant. He doesn't care. Charlie Kirk represented something that you represent, Jay Dyer, that others represent, and they would shoot you just as fast as they would shoot Charlie Kirk, and they would shoot me or anybody else were they to have the chance. So the fact that you're trying to like take down the Catholic Church or take down Catholics in the middle, it's almost like you're at Waterloo and you've got Napoleon on the ropes. England and Russia have Napoleon on the ropes, and they're about to take him down, and the Austrians, and he's about to go down. And then the English decide to give a bloody nose to the Austrians that are helping to fight Napoleon because they've got some. And it's like, no, let's deal with the existential threat that is Napoleon, who is let's just say, the face of modernity and all of how lethal and threatening it is to all of us. And then we can get back to sort of quarreling with each other. Right? But yeah, no, the way that I see what Jay Dyer and the Ortho Bros are doing is we're in the middle of Waterloo. As Wellington said about Waterloo, it was a damn near thing. We almost lost it. And you've got this contingent over here that wants to fight you in the middle of an existential battle against somebody that wants all of us eliminated.
If this is really for the concern of the best of the people and the young people and all the people coming to the church, where are the flyers warning about all the gay, ecumenist, LGBTQ plus and pro-trans people in the Orthodox world? Oh, there's not any. I've never seen one. But you better believe that if you ever have a crooked toenail in the direction of right-wing things, you're under their watch.
Boy, does that sound familiar? But come on, Ortho Bros, come on in. The water is fine.
That's why I don't take these people too seriously. When Father Thomas Soroka would put stuff, I've saved all these, by the way, over the years, because I knew all this stuff would come back. So I have the receipts, like on Facebook, him saying that he's going to put an end to this Ortho Bro stuff. This was like back in 2020. All of this Ortho Bro, this toxic internet Ortho Bro debating, this will not last much longer. I'm going to put an end, all this kind of like this talk of what he's going to do, threats, all this kind of stuff.
I think the fear, I think part of the fear that Jay and some of these others who would otherwise want to continue debating Catholics and trying to knock down Catholics in the middle of this crisis that we're all in is that they, in many ways, rightly and genuinely see the strength and size of the Catholic Church. And they're afraid that we to win this culture war, as I think we're poised to do, though it's still a damn near thing. The other side could very well easily still win it. Were we to win the culture war, they're going to see as like the Catholics are going to just turn their guns on the Orthodox, which I would actually contend is not as likely as maybe some of these, I think, kind of conspiratorial minded people would believe. I believe that many conservative Orthodox Catholics would turn to the Ortho Bros, or those conservative Orthodox minded Orthodox, as fellow travelers, and we could get to working on some of the theological disputes, as opposed to just trying to wipe out and eliminate the Orthodox, the conservative Orthodox among their ranks, and trying to dilute them or annihilate them, or whatever the fear is that they may fear that happens if they were to align themselves with Catholics, and if we were to win this cultural battle against those forces of secularism and indifference. That's part of what I think the fear is. I think there's a few other things in there as well, dealing with how society is structured politically and religiously and things like that. I think that's some of the hesitation as well. But I do think that there's a general, they may not ever admit it. It may be, they probably see it as a sign of weakness to admit it. But the Catholic Church is a formidable institution in many respects. So to align yourself with it and then to win the battle, the fear is that the church would turn its arm against them in the end of that whole conflict with the seculars.
Never even talked to this person. Never said anything about this person. Don't know him. And yet he is going to put an end to all the toxic Ortho Bros. For what? Why? Now, the Israel element is part of this. In fact, back in 2018, one of the reasons, 1718, that they wanted to cast me as neo-in is merely for criticizing Zionist type stuff back then. And there were actual Zio-fanatic priests and neocon boomers in the priesthood who also participated in this, wanting me to be ousted or thrown out of the church or whatever. Now, guess what? Here we are in 2025. All of that, the Overton window has shifted. All the stuff I warned you about with the push for the EP and Rome Union, it just happened. They're doing it now. They're pushing it now. They said I was a crazy conspiracy theorist because I said this was coming. Let's not forget the COOF, when about half of the Orthodox world showed that they don't actually believe Orthodoxy. They tried to have.
See, they don't sell this, man.
To Dean
I keep doing that. It's so annoying. They don't sell that on Orthodox Twitter, Orthodox X, as they're discussing things about, the greatness of Orthodoxy and why become Orthodox and why avoid Catholicism. Ultimately, their argument is that on paper, on a theoretical level, Orthodoxy defeats Catholicism on a theoretical level. On paper, you match it up, whether that be theologically or historically. Theoretically, Orthodoxy is greater, in the Orthodoxy triumphs in that debate. But then they'll do this like sleight of hand, right? I had my cards out, my deck of cards out. They'll do this sleight of hand where they'll switch to speaking as if it's also in praxis. He's still sitting here ranting. It's also in praxis, where if you were to join Orthodoxy, all of the based clips that you see, all of the Luigi tweets that you see, all of this like nonsense that they manifest over and over and over again in hopes that it will sort of create its own existence, Just join, and that's what you're going to find when you join Orthodoxy. They don't actually sell it as, hey guys, in reality, we're kind of dealing with a lot of the same things that Catholics and Protestants are dealing with. And we actually, in some ways, don't even have really good tools to manage it or defeat it in our own ranks. We're neophytes. We're new here. They have all the institutional power. They basically run the OAC. They are the ecumenical patriarch is involved in these unilateral talks with Rome against the wishes of, say, the Patriarch of Moscow. And so we have to like shift and align and come up with these factions in order to make our paradigm exist as we say it exists on paper. So Jay, he'll pass probably, several, whether figuratively or literally, he'll pass several Orthodox churches that may be in his jurisdiction, or the jurisdiction that he's in, to go to a ROCOR church, which sort of more fits the what he theoretically sees Orthodoxy applying to Orthodoxy, exactly as the traditionalists in the Catholic Church do. And he and the Ortho Bros love to pick off from the traditionalist ranks because they see that kind of overlap. Jay and them are at least astute enough. I don't know if I don't think the traditionalists see it, because the traditionalists, when you're on top, you kind of aren't worried about the stuff that's going on underneath of you. When you're on the bottom and you're looking up, you're paying attention. So the Orthodox are well aware of what's going on up there with the trads and the Catholic Church. The Catholic trads aren't so aware of what's going on in Orthodoxy. So a smooth talking Orthodox guy comes along and he sells you a used Orthodox car, and you think you're getting this, this road monster, and really you're getting a lemon. Then yeah, I mean, this is what a lot of us have been complaining about, and this is part of the major problem that I have with Eastern Orthodoxy as it's presented online. And yeah, I don't think many Catholics have grasped this yet, and I think the way I see it, and look, I respect Eric Ibarra, I respect Elijah Yassi, I respect a lot of these guys that go out and debate the Orthodox, but so many of the Catholics are like bulls with the nose ring, just being led around from subject to subject to subject. Papacy, filioque, papacy, filioque. And they don't even stop for 2 seconds. And I know Elijah and Eric know these things, but like your average person that consumes this stuff, or even some of the ones that create it or engage in these debates, they're not even aware of the internal problems that exist within Orthodoxy and the internal contradictions that exist within Orthodoxy. And so they couldn't take it on. They couldn't even do an internal critique of Eastern Orthodoxy because they don't know enough about Eastern Orthodoxy. All they can do is play defensive. It's all they're able to do when it comes to the Eastern Orthodox. And the Eastern Orthodox know that game. They know the defensive Catholic game, which is why I'm constantly preaching, if you're going to debate Eastern Orthodox, which I don't actually think is a good thing for us to be doing, but regardless, if you're going to be debating Eastern Orthodoxy, why don't you try, strategically going on the offensive and challenging some of their ecclesial, historical, and theological suppositions? Just food for thought. Let me see where we're at here.
Not teach.
If I keep going back, we're never going to get anywhere.
Horrible crap lib article. It's like literal Ricardi Schwartz level stuff. Okay. So notice, people like this, like Father Thomas Soroka, they would rather collaborate with the Tablet and Sarah Ricardi Schwartz, pro-TRANZ people, openly pro-TRANZ people, while also saying they're so based in trad. But watch out for those ortho bros. They're so mean, they're so bad, they're so toxic. What they don't understand is that this is not 1993. This is not the era when important people are reading the Tablet. Let's check out what Fordham Magazine and The Wheel say. Let's check out what Sarah Ricardi Schwartz says. They're academics. That people don't care about that. That's why on their social media, they get 1, 2, 3 likes. So They are freaking out. That generation is worried that the next generation that's coming that will be priests and clergy are rigorous and ortho bros, just normal men.
Bro, is Jay
And they're
like
not going to be subservient
Jay's talking like the
order takers,
Orthodox Catholics here.
from liberal bishops.
Just wait
who
long
are
enough,
covertly
and
members
the
of the
the priesthood's gonna, the
Democratic Socialist Party.
demographic's gonna change.
Literally. Or liberal Orthodox bishops that are covertly homosexual.
He chewed
How about that?
tobacco. What is it? Oh man!
By the way, if you want to support the stream,
If he doesn't, I mean, there's got to
chats.
be something
See,
interesting here. I
like
thought this was going to be more
Father
interesting.
Ted Pissard, except for the lunatic Nathaniel Kapner, all of these people are ecumenists, perennialists, like David Bentley Hart, universalists, originists, pro-Skittles, and or neocons, and or just angry at me for no reason. And somebody didn't even understand that. They thought I was saying that every one of these people is all the things I listed. No, they're not all neocons and Democrats. That doesn't make any sense. It's and or. Ecumenist and or boomer docs. What do I mean by boomer docs? That I take that to mean people that take Americanism.
Problem with the boomers in their church, huh? Boy, all of this sounds so familiar.
Second to that. Anything Americanist comes first, and Orthodoxy is interpreted through the lens of Americanism. So that would be the kind of the neocon attitude. For example, the first time I attended St. Justin Martyr, Father Ted's church, he gave a homily where he said, Mother Teresa was a saint, an ideal saint for the Orthodox Church. That's total nonsense, totally not true. And in the prayers of the liturgy included prayers against the terror state of Iran. I mean, just weird stuff, right? Just weird. So it's not surprising to me that years later he says he's pro Skittles. So no, like, why would I find any of that surprising?
So Jay is saying that what he found on paper didn't match up to the local church that he attended first. So he had to go do a little church shopping to find that truly trad Orthodox church.
Do you think that because I don't talk about it, that means it's not happening? Of course not. Me not talking about it is me just ignoring it and moving on and doing my own thing.
Oh,
but these people continue to do it.
Oh, clip that, folks. Let me hear that again. Where are we at? Why is he not
all kinds of
about
weird
it?
stuff? So, like, at a certain
he's not talking
point,
about these
man,
problems in Orthodoxy.
I've not said anything about any of this stuff for 2 or 3 years. Do you think that
yet we weekly debate the errors of Catholicism and the Vatican II Church and Chiete and Nostra Aetate and all of the problems in the Catholic Church? I will weekly point fingers at that and ignore the 3 that are pointing back at me just because I've got other things to
talk about it. That means it's not happening. Of course not. Me not talking about it is me just ignoring it and moving on and doing my own thing.
What is his
but
own
these
thing?
People
We're just going to focus on others.
They don't want young dudes that are masculine converting because it's a problem. Because now they have to have more priests.
Because they
now they have to deal with spurgy young dudes with theology questions, and a lot of these people don't care about theology. They would rather just have coffee hour and whatever.
See, it's almost as if, and again, I heard kudos to Andrew Wilson. I heard Andrew Wilson acknowledge this, unlike I don't think I've ever heard Jay acknowledge this or those usual suspects on X, that it's almost as if there's a general trend in young men. He calls them spurgs. I think it's just young men with intelligence and curiosity, that they're showing an interest in traditional things. Be that whether they stumble down the Orthodox pipeline, the Catholic pipeline, or the more traditional high church Protestant pipeline. And it seems like of the two, Catholicism is probably the larger pipeline that many of them are going down. And then there's a contingent of them going down to the Orthodox pipeline. And it's almost as if it's a Christian-wide, a broad phenomenon that is taking place Whereas, like, yeah, the Orthodox are, I don't know whether there's more going into like high church Protestantism or Orthodoxy. It's tough to say. I haven't seen the numbers on that, but certainly it's at least second place, I would say, the Orthodox, just for the sheer logistics and numbers of those that are young people, young men that are going down that rabbit hole towards interest in these subjects. And that meme of the first prize, second prize, third prize, the third prize guy, like, you know, biting the bronze coin and shaking up the champagne. That's what the Orthodox sound like a lot when they're like claiming victory over all these things and not acknowledging that this is happening in Catholicism as well. You have a shift in Catholicism where for the last 25 years now, the trend, and I've heard priests acknowledge this, I've heard bishops acknowledge this, that the trend in the seminaries is towards traditionalism, conservatism. I've heard the word a rigorism that's being sort of like a pejorative that's being tossed around. Young liberal men, progressive men, they're not joining the monasteries. They're not committing themselves to a lifelong of celibacy in the priesthood. It's a very specific group of men in the Catholic Church that are coming out of the seminaries, and they're starting to filter into the parishes. And yeah, it's going to get, there's not as many as we would like. That's certainly a problem. But they're also, that mirrors the issues that are taking place in the Orthodox Church as well, where they're tearing down or selling off Orthodox properties here in New England, the area where historically, or the Rust Belt, the area where historically the Orthodox dominated at demographically, because a general fallout of the demographics of Orthodox in these areas, where they've either moved on or they've climbed the economic ladder and turned more secular, or they've just fallen away from the church or whatever, or they're just not had children and those kinds of numbers. All of that stuff you're seeing in the Orthodox Church on the negative end of things and on the positive end of things that you're finding in the Catholic Church, as well as this influx of young men showing up and showing interest in theology and these types of things that the boomers overall just weren't interested in. I have to believe that deep down, Jay knows this. Like, he's not that dumb. He probably, I mean, he knows he's probably a little bit captured by his audience. He knows the consequences of acknowledging these types of things. And so, you know, I would love to see a little bit of integrity there where these guys would at least just acknowledge that this isn't unique to them. But they really do seem, again, I think Jay's probably aware, but a lot of these ones you run into online really do seem to be that third place bronze medal guy biting down and splashing the, you know, shaking up the champagne bottle like the meme would tell you it is.
Is this Zionism good or bad or whatever? Who cares? They don't want to talk about that, right? So spurgy young dudes are converting, and that's why they would, in many cases, not have the spurgy young dudes there. That's just the reality.
I would say one potential
and after
difference.
10 years of it.
One potential difference here is that overall, what I've seen in the Catholic Church, and this may be that we're a little bit more advanced further along than the Eastern Orthodox Church is in this whole process, is that we've kind of, it sounds like there's a lot of remnants of the old OCA still in Orthodoxy. Many of them are probably still very young. Or at least, you know, he's saying the boomers here, who knows, maybe it is all boomers, maybe they'll all be gone in 20 years. I don't know. But, you know, I think you still have a pretty large progressive liberal demographic that exists within Orthodoxy that is going to fight the Ortho Bros. And the Ortho Bros would do well to make friends with those that are like-minded as opposed to making enemies. But regardless, be that as it may, in the Catholic Church, what I'm seeing more and more is a young priest shows up, or young men are showing up, fathers, young families. I'm seeing it over and over in different places. I'm hearing about it. The stats seem to be backing it up, at least what's available. There's not now. There's going to be pushback from the older ones, but I think we're just further along in the process where at a parish level, and even in some respects at a diocesan level, they kind of know. I mean, I've heard things about like what some of the bishops are doing, because they are already well aware of they've been aware for the last decade of what's been taking place in the seminaries, of these young traditionalist minded young men coming into the seminaries. So these more progressive minded bishops have been aware for this for a long time. So while I think, they may try to institutionalize some of their progressive gains and things, we're just seem to be further along in that, because I don't see a lot of them stopping. There's a few exceptions to this rule. You have the case down there, what happened with that bishop who took over Charlotte, but I think that's actually the exception to the rule. I don't think that bishop is the rule. I've been, the 2 dioceses that I've lived in since becoming a Catholic, the bishops that have taken over those dioceses are 100% behind these young priests coming in and cleaning up the parishes and revamping them and doing more traditionalist leaning liturgies. And the fruit of it is that you're starting to see a lot of young families fill up some of these parishes. So I think those bishops are, as far as the bottom line goes, I want to say charitably, I think that they see this as a good thing overall. But certainly as far as the bottom line goes in keeping these parishes open and alive, they see the goodness that comes from that. Whereas it sounds like what Jay is saying, what the Ortho Bros are facing is just the progressives in the OCA and the Greek Orthodox Church and whatnot are really digging their heels in and trying to weed out as best they can this sort of conservative element, because, and this is important, again, make sure you've watched my Against the Latin video that we did in that Orthodox series, because the important thing here is that Jay Dyer, that guy Luigi, all of these sort of like Ortho Bro tough guys on X, they're not in the true Orthodox Church. They're not in the Greek Old Calendarist Church. They're in, at best, they're in Rokor. They're in the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, which is still in communion with the main body of ecumenists. So Jay can't do like, let's, for example, say the Sede Vacantis could do, or even to an extent SSPX could do, where they could say, well, that's just them over there. That's just the Catholics, doing this crazy thing that we don't agree with, but we're not actually in full communion with them. Jay is in full communion with the main worldwide body of Orthodox churches. So he's kind of beholden to these things. And, we're like, those of us who are traditionally minded in the Catholic Church, like, yeah, we kind of have to answer for Father James Martin because we're in communion with him. And I do think that there's ways to address that. And, as my priest, God bless his soul, passed away, used to say, death and retirement solves a lot of issues. Some of it's just going to be, yes, it's going to be waiting out the boomers. God bless you, you Orthodox conservative boomers out there. I'm not saying we're all waiting for you to die off, but there's a few, you guys, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm talking about. You know who I'm talking about. We would just want some of them to, at the very least, just retire quietly and go away, and let the new crop come in. Very least, let Gen X take over the reins for a little bit. Man, where was I going with that? Yeah, so he's in communion with the wider Orthodox Church, which means that even if he doesn't agree with all of these politics, I had another point I was going to make, but point slipped. Maybe I'll just listen a little bit. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Almost like, I just don't care anymore. I really don't care anymore. I don't care what priests or whoever's mad and doesn't. I mean, it didn't do anything. The promise of shutting all the Ortho Bros down and they're going to put an end to this internet orthodoxy. We'll put an end to nothing. They didn't do anything. It only made it worse for them. The reason you don't want masculine men to convert is because when they go into the priesthood, if that's where they go, into the diaconate, they're not going to be yes men. And certain entities in the Orthodox world function like a military. They're actually structured like a military. You can go ask Father Andrew more about this. So they want a top-down structure where you just do what you're told. And while Orthodoxy has a hierarchy, it is not a papal system. It's not a military. A bishop is not infallible. They don't have the right to just do anything and tell you. They can't tell you I own your house now. I'm your bishop. Give me your house. No, they can't. So there's limits to these kinds of things.
Yeah, we'll protest. We don't
A bishop
have to
can't
listen.
come in and say, you're going to stop praying the Nicene Creed. They can't do that. It's not papism. But papism is always tempting, especially in situations where there's a larger agenda to push ecumenism. Now, another key element of all this isn't ortho bros and this and that. It's also the ecumenist side. Unfortunately, Uncle Sam and his benefactors.
Make sure you guys watch. It's one of the best ones in the whole series, in my humble opinion, Against the Latins, to understand Catholics, to understand exactly what Jay is criticizing here. Most of you don't understand what the ecumenical movement within Orthodoxy is and what it represents, and the challenges and the contradictions of Jay being in communion with it. Just making a funny face here, so let me pause him.
Have a very vested interest in ecumenism. And that pressure is put on all of the jurisdictions. That is why you saw Representative Wilson saying Orthodoxy, particularly Russian Orthodoxy, is a giant Putin operation. Even though ROCOR comes out of people fleeing Russia, makes no sense. It's because it says Russia, a Putin organization. It's crazy.
Was he talking about ROCOR or Russian Orthodox Church?
And what is he? Neocon. What was the other one that was saying the same stuff? One of these other government goobers? Neocon. Who do neocons answer to? Israel. Duh. I mean, you can go on Twitter now, and every neocon politician gets called out every day by thousands of people because everyone tracks who donates to them. When I talked about foundations and think tanks,
yeah, I don't really find his I find his geopolitical stuff to be a bit tedious and annoying at times. So I think that's about all we're going to give that. So, class, did you learn anything today? I don't know. I don't do a lot of these reaction videos, but I think he gave us a little bit there to ruminate over. The way I see it, the last video that I did on the Errors of Orthodox series, Errors of Orthodoxy, is that the video was called Losky, Romanides, and the Making of Modern Orthodoxy. And the way that I see it is that the Ortho Bros have a particular challenge within their own community. I'm going to do a recap. I'm going to do a recap of the whole series because there is an overall arc to the series that maybe isn't as clear to some of you guys who are sort of newer to this. There's 7 videos in it. 2 parts on the schism, the issues over land and the issues over theological issues. There's a 3rd one, which is about the concession that the Orthodox made towards the Asmite debate, especially around their willingness to contend with the West over this issue. The 4th is on Caesaro Mehmed II, Sultan Mehmed II, Caesaro-Papism, and the making of the Orthodox Church, which sort of is my way of saying where the modern Orthodox Church emerges from. The 4th is it's the one that's probably the most as an outlier to the series is the one on Peter the Aleut. Martyr or Myth, though it does tie into the arc of the series because it deals with some of the things that why he was recognized as a martyr by the AOC, I keep wanting to say AOC, like I'm talking about the representative, the OCA and Rocor, and as well why the Orthobros have kind of picked him up as this mythological figure in defiance of the West. So it ties into the arc overall. Then there is, where am I at? Then there is the one I keep mentioning tonight, which is largely related to the subject that Jay is talking about here. I called it Against the Latins, Orthodoxy as Reactionism. And the final one is Lausci Romanides in the Making of Modern Orthodoxy. Now, that Against the Latin ones, the last two, Against the Latins and Lausci Romanides in the Making of Modern Orthodoxy, those two are largely dealing with this issue of this internal contradiction that exists, that has always existed within Eastern Orthodoxy, where they both have embraced an ecumenical stance and rejected an ecumenical stance towards the West. Now, folks like Jay Dyer, he's not alone here. Many, I would say if you're within the, what I would call the centrist body of Orthodox, and even, and of course, the right-leaning body of Orthodox, you would probably believe this to be the case, that all of those historic overtures towards Rome were an aberration. They were in contradiction to true Orthodoxy. But I make the case in these videos that there's a real problem with that, and that is how deeply, one, how the Orthodox, like Jay Dyer and some of these others say, the Orthodox is protected from this type of problem, versus two, the reality that the problem existed for many centuries, where, for example, you had the introduction of Thomas Aquinas. You had the introduction of scholasticism. You had the introduction of a manualist tradition that existed, most of you don't know about this, that existed in Eastern Orthodoxy that lasted for centuries. So much so that by the time that you get to people like Florovsky, by the time you get to people like Lausci, they make the claim, by the time you get to people like Romanides, they make the claim that the Greek church and the Russian church, the two large bodies of Eastern Orthodoxy, were in wholesale captivity to the West. They called it the Western captivity of the Orthodox Church. And they were coming along to correct this problem. Now, the problem is that they're reinterpreting, they're doing a sort of ressourcement back into Eastern Orthodoxy over the last several centuries since the schism. And they want to just say, okay, this group over here that was involved in all of that, they're not actually the true Orthodox, but we over here are the true Orthodox. Now, the ecumenical movement comes along in the last 100 years, and they're not, I don't think they're actually new. I think they are the way that things had been moving in Eastern Orthodoxy really since the beginning of the schism, at the very least since the beginning of this Second Lyons, right? The first attempt at reunion between the two churches. There's been basically an almost continuous trajectory of ecumenical overtures, with the exception that, like, for example, the Ottomans made that a really difficult thing. Which is why I called it the making of the modern Orthodox, or the making of the Orthodox Church, that episode on Mehmed. But then, yeah, they continue that process in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s as this ecumenical movement is being born, quote unquote. But I don't think it's, like I said, I don't think it's that it's being born. I think it's that there's a reactionary movement being born. The reactionary movement is being born out of this Greek nationalist movement that's taking place in Greece, where they want to break from the Ottoman Empire. the Greek, the nationalist movements in Eastern Europe, right, where they are, but they eventually come up, it gets all convoluted with the rise of the Soviet Union. But anyways, the sort of pan-Slavic identity that's rising at that time, as well as the theological output of these men known as the neo-patristic writers, the Neo-Palamites, who are reinterpreting Palamos, and they're saying, well, actually, yeah, there was a distinct, unique Eastern Orthodox Church that almost existed quasi within this captive Eastern Orthodoxy Church that existed for centuries. And it's like a remnant church that existed within Eastern Orthodox. I don't think they've quite worked out the logistics of all of this. I'm just trying to explain as I see it. And I don't think they've actually sat down and thought about the ramifications of all of this. Because then once you get to right now, today, I don't know what happened there, it dropped out. Once you get to right now, today, what you find is certain thinkers, there's a series, I forget what the series is called, a series of books written by a group of Eastern Orthodox authors where they're going back and they're revisiting like Greek scholasticism, for example. And they're actually saying, hey, this is actually part of our Orthodox patrimony. It was, by all intents and purposes, received into Eastern Orthodoxy. Now, the Neo-Palamites, the new Palamites, can come along and say, oh, that was all a big mistake. We got to like switch gears here and try to extract from the tumorous body the healthy orthodoxy. But that's not what the Ortho Bros are selling you. The Ortho Bros are selling you this long, continuous, unadulterated first millennium church that comes to us to this very day. And they would say that the ecumenical movement is actually the body of Orthodox that is you should call it the neo-ecumenical movement, whereas the Palamites were the ones that were always there and they always reigned supreme. But the Neo-Palamites are called the Neo-Palamites largely due to the fact that Palamos was not he wasn't inconsequential, but he wasn't the primary figure of study by the time of the 20th century in Orthodox studies. It's just the reality of it. They had to go back and re-emphasize and reinterpret Palamos, and that's what the Ortho Bros are trying to sell you. But the Ortho Bros are in this sticky situation where, to be consistent, in my opinion, they would actually have to follow more along the lines of the true Orthodox Church, who says, hey, that ecumenical thing that's happening, that's been happening, is actually heretical and it's a problem. And that first millennium church that we're supposed to represent should exclude that. You should not be in communion with that. And you, Jay Dyer, and you, Ortho Bros, whether you're in ROCOR or not, ROCOR is in communion with that worldwide ecumenical body. Therefore, you are in communion with heretics. We, the true Orthodox Church, are not. And I think that's a serious problem for the Ortho Bros, at least in terms of consistency. This has nothing to do with Catholicism. This is me. I wasn't even totally sold on Catholicism when I was studying all of this. So I was kind of trying to be like an objective, impartial observer of these things. And you do need to have a little bit of your own critical thinking capacity to like view these things and review these things, because there's not a body of like polemical literature out there that just is sitting in standby waiting for you. The Orthodox have the luxury of all of the hard work that the Protestants have done for the last 500 years of digging into the papacy, which is why I have that third video against the Azomites video going into that whole thing, because the Orthodox have basically just stolen the Protestant. The Protestants were right. Luther immediately recognized, the Protestants immediately recognized that the line in the sand is the papacy. The one thing that all the Protestants agreed with, they disagreed with each other on just about everything. The one thing that across the board they agreed on was the papacy was the Antichrist. The papacy was the problem. Papism. for the Orthodox, they couldn't even figure out what we were, what as a problem, what we were. First, we were the Azomites. Then we were the Filioquists. Now, of course, conveniently, we're the Papists because it is the real problem. But they relied on in my opinion, now there was criticisms of the papacy before Protestants, but the real legwork was done by those Protestants, and they rely heavily on it. So that's what I got for you guys. This has been a Patreon live. I don't even know if I scheduled this for free members. I hope I did. I'll go back and add it for free members if I didn't. I thought I'm going to have to be careful if I do that in the future. But anyways, guys, that's what I got for you for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. God bless. And I will see you all next time.
Honey, their coffee can't hold a candle to yours. Instant Folgers taste good as fresh perked.
This is Earth, the year 2100. This is the headquarters of Space Patrol. And men from Earth, Mars, and Venus live and work there as guardians of peace.
In the nation's capital, President Johnson today welcomed British Prime Minister Douglas Hume.